Data Storytellers. Today, I'm here with Morten Ørris Poulsen, who's the head of analytics over at Kamstrup. Thanks for joining us, Morten.
Well, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
Just to start with, tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, your current role, your passion for analytics, a bit of a summary of Morten.
Well, as you can probably hear from my accent, I'm not born with English as my native language, so I'm Danish by birth. And that's where I lived most of my life. I had a brief stop in Spain in my high school years where I lived there. But essentially, the very short story is that I'm an engineer by training, manufacturing engineer actually, and that's also where I started my career. But quickly found out that the passion I had throughout my studies for programming, for math, I could take that easily into the work I did. And after a couple of detours on the dark side, working as a management consultant, for example, I ended up working with business intelligence at the Lego Group, and then later transitioned into big data and data science at the same place. And that led me to the job that I have currently at Kamstrup, where I head up our analytics setup.
And you're kind of the living embodiment of moving from a more IT focus to analytics, right? BI, then big data and analytics, then data science, and now heading up analytics for Kamstrup. What are you up to in the current role then?
Essentially, Kamstrup provides software and hardware for utilities. So basically, the foundation for the company is meters for water utilities, for power utilities, and also for district heating, which is sort of a Northern European thing. But basically, we have the meters that measure the consumption and is able to give all sorts of alarms. And then obviously, there's a short stretch thought-wise from having a meter that collects data to actually building some software on top that allows you to extract some knowledge and then act upon it. And it's the latter that we do as part of the analytics team.
Interesting. So you come from Lego and now at Kamstrup, two very different organizations, probably using analytics in very different ways. How do you see the data analytics function today? What do you think about the general progress of data-driven business transformation in the corporate world?
I've always smiled when I hear the word data-driven, because maybe it's because of my Danish heritage, because driven in Danish also means that someone is bossing you around. And this notion that data is sort of telling you where to go is one that doesn't sit very well with me. So I prefer data informed. That's much better. And honestly, I think the term has been around for quite a few years now, but it still feels like we have quite a long way to go. We talk a lot about it, and it's part of almost any C-level person's vocabulary that we need to be data driven. But there's a fairly long road ahead of us before we sort of fully become data driven in all aspects of our operations.
Very interesting about the dynamic of the word driven. What do you think is data informed, and how would you define an organization or a team that is data informed?
I actually think it's the ideal organization, if you can talk about such a thing, is one that is that actually is informed both by quantitative data as well as qualitative data. I had a brief stop while working for Lego in something called Global Insights, and that was a brilliant mix of people working sort of with traditional insights, so ethnographics and similar people who would go out and actually speak to people and understand what their thoughts were about particular topics, particular products. And then we would bring sort of the hard data of actually looking at how people would behave when they had interactions with our digital offerings. And I think that mix, if you can have that mix in any leadership process where you get both hard data as well as someone who's actually going out and talking to people, that to me is a killer combo.
And this is super interesting, because a lot of data analytics and making people data informed, let's say, is about good communication and leveraging an influential mindset and almost infecting the business with a positive culture. What are some of the ways that maybe when you were at Lego that you were able to have these communications with the product teams and be able to, as you said, leverage that hard data in the right way?
I actually think that doesn't just apply to Lego or to Kamstrup or to my previous positions, that in most cases, having something that people can look at, something they can touch, is by far the best way to persuade people to invest in it. It's very, very hard to sell slideware. when it comes to data analytics, because it ends up being a lot of charts and a lot of big claims, but it isn't until people can actually see what kind of difference does it make for them that they are willing to buy into it. I had a manager early on who said, well, the biggest difference between working with business intelligence and working with analytics is that with business intelligence, you can still do the calculations on the back of a napkin. And that gives some confidence into the conversations, because you can actually sit down and do the math and say, okay, I now trust the things that they came up with. With analytics, and I think especially with machine learning, we are asking people to trust us, because it's very, very hard to explain exactly what goes on in the stomach of a machine learning algorithm. And that's the challenge that we face, and I also think we are failing sometimes to accept that we cannot just expect people to trust us by face value. It has to be something that we demonstrate to them that this is worth trusting.
Lots of great stuff there, and actually, before we get into that, I just want to kind of touch on your own career background. Moving from the BI on the back of a napkin to actually having to leverage that trust. How was that transition for you, moving from being able to show someone here's the data to being able to being maybe more a bit subjective to other people's trust?
I say we because we were a team that all started on the journey together. We found it difficult, and it wasn't until we started building small dummies or small prototypes that people could actually see that they started saying, okay, now I understand what it is you're talking about. Now I understand the difficulties that you have explained to me. But more importantly, now I understand what kind of value can this bring to my business. Because at the end of the day, that is what we're here to do. We're here to bring insights and business value.
So what role do you think that data analytics leaders play in these transformations today? Are they the guys who need to build that trust, or is that just a part of their role? What do you think?
I think it's a fairly big part of the role. There are obviously other aspects to the role, but I think building this trust is a key part of it. Otherwise, you won't be successful in a role like that. And I'm by no means saying that I've nailed it, because if I did, I probably would be teaching this stuff and making a ton of money or writing books about it. So I'm still learning as well.
Yeah, and that it's a journey, right? Just like any transformation, it's not just an organizational thing; it's an individual as well, right? Definitely. What do you think are some of the big challenges for data leaders today?
I like to think that it's the breadth of the role that is making it very, very difficult, and I also think that makes it difficult to step into, especially early on in your career, because it is this mix of obviously having some classical leadership skills of knowing how to lead a team, setting some direction. There's also a bit of salesmanship in it, because of what we just talked about. You have to go out and build that trust. You have to explain something that can be fairly difficult to explain. It's fairly technical. But you also have to have enough technical knowledge to entertain conversations with the people on your team who will actually be developing these things. Because in my experience, at least, that's what they appreciate more than anything. That is that you're willing to enter into even the deep conversations with them. You don't have to be an expert. That's what they are there that's the role they fill. But you have to know enough that you can have a qualified conversation, understand what it is that they are trying to bring forward.
And you mentioned salesmanship there, which is key. What are some of the examples of good and bad salesmanship that you've seen in this context of trying to sell data analytics?
I think whenever I see someone starting a presentation and they start in PowerPoint, and before they bring it into full screen, you can see that there's 96 slides now waiting ahead of you. That to me suggests that here's someone who's boiling the ocean. So you haven't been able to cut down your storyline, so you stay focused on the essentials. And usually the same presentations tend to start bottom up. So you start with all the beautiful things that technology can bring to you, and you talk a lot about technology, and you talk a lot about roles and mechanics and methods. And then only towards the end you start talking about, and what does that actually mean for the business. I think it's very much a question of trying to paint the picture of, imagine this. And then having people imagine, well, it would be nice for me to have this particular problem solved. And then you can start talking into, well, this is how we can actually help you solve these problems. So it's very much the sort of the traditional approach of a journalist, that you work from the conclusion backwards, and not the approach of a researcher where you do the opposite.
Agreed. And I think that the hallmark of a good story is that you start off with the general context. Okay, what maybe if you're presenting to the business, why is this important for you? Where am I coming from with it? And that doesn't need to take very long. That just setting the scene is a key part, but it shouldn't take, as you said, a number of slides to do that. Then really getting into the meat again, keeping people engaged is about intrigue pings. It's about the particular way of getting that message across. And if you're doing it in 12 slides, then it's probably not the most engaging message. Maybe for you it is, but for the person you're presenting to, less so. So from your experience, what do you think are some of the qualities of leaders who inspire this real change and then this good storytelling?
Let me start by splitting it in two. So there's the role you can play when trying to inspire people when you are when they're physically present, and then there are the challenges of doing the same thing online. I probably no big surprise there that it's you lack the breadth of tools that you have available when you are physically present when you're doing it online. But physically present, I think that's to me it's almost showmanship. You don't have to be an actor. You don't have to be someone who's very good at giving speeches, but you have to be authentic and use yourself. So to me, moving around on stage, interacting with people, asking them questions, actually being willing to sort of digress from your set agenda based on what people are interested in is a key part of getting that engagement. And then I think physical drops is also a nice way of getting people engaged in the talks. Obviously, when I worked for the Labor Group, that was fairly straightforward. There was always a lot of materials lying around that you could use for that. But it was actually surprising to see that that was not necessarily the modus operandi of meetings or presentations, that you would do that. Maybe because everybody felt, well, that's sort of, well, everybody has thought of this before, so why on earth would I want to do this? But I still found that it worked very well, and I definitely think that when I've done these things outside of Lego, using the props is a key differentiator between the things that go well and the things that are even just average.
Yeah, and there is a balance between using cliche and then reinventing the wheel, I think. And I think you're kind of touching on that there. Interesting about the showmanship as well, and being this actor, because it's very easy. And you see this on LinkedIn all the time, people who post they're data consultants, they post like weird videos that have no insights, nothing to do with data. And I think that does border on the side of, well, there's definitely less value there, but also almost like cringing. It turns people off. And that's the line that's really hard to balance. When you say about using a prop, for example, that's an example of a technique that's going to make people attach the real message to the show, and then that's how you get the message across. It's almost clandestine in a way, but actually all it is a good hallmark of a great message or a great presentation, I think. Again, with the qualities of the leaders you've seen do this well, or maybe times you've done it well, what do you think are some of the keywords, some of the adjectives you would use to describe the people who are good at this stuff?
Well, authentic, as I mentioned before, is one of the first things that come to mind. But then I also think the simplicity of their messages is a key differentiator. Then I think being able to not take yourself too seriously and be almost vulnerable in your approach to suggest that, well, there is something ahead of us here, and while we're excited about it, we also recognize that there are things that we don't know squat about. So there's also challenges ahead. So there's this honesty about what it is we're facing. I think to me is at least something that makes me go, okay, I'm willing to go to battle with you, because it sounds like you have a plan, you have an idea, but you're not being unrealistic about what is it going to take to actually get there.
That's a great analogy to use about going to battle with someone as like a data team, I think, because as a data organization, you have this very siloed vision, which is very good. It's what you're paid to be there to do and to improve the data. But if you speak to people who are 2, 3, 4 levels up from you, data is only a part of their responsibility. So it's not about fighting for that real estate. I think it's about working in harmony to succeed in the mission. So I think that's a really, really good analogy to use. Again, analogy is a really great storytelling tool to be able to let people associate a particular idea with something that they understand.
I fully agree. And that's also why I think the whole field of data journalism is one that we shouldn't ignore. There's a lot of great things coming out from that field. I started out with data visualization being sort of the focus when I did business intelligence, and one of the things I fairly quickly learned there was that this is not about preferences. We happen to like a particular way of displaying things. This is actually about hard science, that someone has actually done the work of understanding what is the quickest way of making people understand a particular thing, and this is the way you then present it. So when you pick the colors blue, gray, and brown, that's because they all instill trust, and they're easy to read off, and they don't conflict with people who are colorblind. So there's a lot of sense behind that, which I thoroughly enjoy. But then I also enjoy design. So I also think cutting things down visually as well, when you have a message to bring forward, is also a key way of making people listen to you, because then there's nothing disturbing in the background. So one of the top management guys at the Lego Group was extremely good at doing this. So he would bring these slides that were just pitch black, and then there would be maybe a number in white on it. That would be it, because then you were forced to listen to how him explain why is this number important to us. And I mean, you can easily imagine the opposite, one of these extremely crowded slides where people start reading them. So there is something in trusting that you know what is the core message, and then not caring too much about how do you then end up wording it, because that will actually make you, in most cases, it'll make you freeze. So just stick to the few core messages, and then don't worry too much about how your exact words are going to be, because you know what it is you will tell. And by the way, should you happen to say something wrong, well, you can always go back and change it.
And if someone gives you a question, you can always come back to it later, even if you don't know the answer. I think what you're describing with your old top management leader who had the black slides, to do something like that takes a lot of courage, right? To move the focus away from, for example, most data leaders have a technical background, right? So what that means is that they tend to sit on a computer, very introverted, or they have done for a lot of their career. And as they move up through the ranks and become more business focused, they find there's this paradigm shift where they now have to speak to people and be engaging and try and be a bit more extroverted. So that takes a lot of courage to do that. And I think that for the leaders who can nail that down, that can nail that balance, who understand the data, not necessarily coding or doing anything more granular, but who can also appreciate that this is for a business need and actually tailor that spotlight towards the business. These are the guys who are going to be the most successful in the space, I think. And yeah, super interesting stuff about that slide. I absolutely love that. And also the colors as well. Can you just expand more on those? Because that's just more of a personal interest thing for me. Like the blue, gray, and brown.
I think if I'm not mistaken, I think it's something like 8%, 6 to 8% of the population in general that's colorblind, and I think it's obviously much more predominant in men than in women. So I think it's only 0.5% of the female population who suffer from this. And the main challenge normally sits around the colors red and green. So something like a traffic light is actually a horrible invention. It can be decoded in traffic, because there is also the positions that let you know which one is lighting up. So there's no danger there. But when you use it in a business context, and we all do this red, yellow, green thing, actually there's going to be a bunch of people there who won't be able to decode it immediately. They're going to have to look for other cues. So I think as a bare minimum, you have to put in other cues to let people know what are you supposed to read out of this information. So yeah, there's a ton of people out there who spend quite a bit of time organizing even color libraries for coding that allows you to pick up colors that are safe for color blindness, which I think is a great thing. I don't have it myself, so I can't imagine what it's like to live without the full spectrum. But I've had a couple of colleagues who had it, and they tell all sorts of funny stories about building full presentations that were all in pink because nobody was there to tell them that actually this, you now pick the color pink. So
just double down
I think,
on it.
Yeah, so I think beyond the funny situation, there's also some seriousness to it. That if our job is to make sure that people can decode information as quickly as possible, then this is something that we also need to take into account.
Yeah, and I think that ties into knowing the audience you're working with and that you're presenting to. I think that using the color blindness as an example, I think that that's an example of good empathy, to be aware of that and having that awareness, and then maybe bringing like a couple of other cues in that aren't necessarily visual. For example, the props, for example, using analogy, and then just getting all of these nailed, I think are really good tools to be able to get that message across. So what role did these skills play in your career, when you were trying to, I don't know, secure executive sponsorship or change the perspective of key stakeholders? Can you give some examples?
Yeah, I think probably one of the best examples I can give was when I still worked as a consultant. I was given an assignment to make quality management interesting, and I was left with the impression that, well, almost saying the words, you can feel dust coming out of your mouth. So I had to do something differently, and we ended up building small games to explain things instead. And to me, that turned out to be it was an eye-opener that you could actually explain something fairly complex in a much simpler way, using something that in many cases is deemed sort of childish. But the fact is that all of us we still enjoy playing. So while it may take us a bit of time to accept that, well, actually now I'm leaving sort of the safe adult mode where everything is serious and actually enter into play, it usually ends up becoming much better interactions when that is part of it. But what sort of brought me on that track was actually the preparation for this event, as it turned out to be, because I was asked to bring back a storyboard, and I asked the guy, "Do you mean a storyboard as in one of those that you would actually make for movies?" And he said, yeah, that would actually be pretty cool. I'm not sure that was what he meant, so I was kicking myself on the way home, saying, "Okay, you shouldn't have asked that." But I went into the local comic store and I bought a copy of comics and brought them back home. And then I sat in the basement for the next 2 weeks building the storyboard. And I used the comics to basically copy off smaller elements because I wasn't strong enough in drawing. So I had to do something to make it seem like this was a reasonable storyboard. So 2 weeks later, I brought it back to the client, saying, "But this is actually what I'm suggesting. Here are, I think it was 2 A4 pages drawn there with smaller pictures, saying this is what I imagine that we do," and slowly just walk him through my proposal. And for the first time ever in my career, and I think also the last time, I hope not, but haven't imagined it since. I had this experience where the other part just say, "Well, I would like to buy one of those. Period. No questions, no comments. Just I would like to buy one of those." So it was an eye opener, and definitely something that made me realize that even if I'm by no means a trained professional when it comes to drawing or illustrating anything like that, still being willing to use those tools even at an amateur level can get you fairly far.
And now we pivot to talking about your new career as a comic book artist with your new superhero. And we're not going to talk about analytics or data or storytelling.
No, just Data Hero.
Data Hero, I love it. Awesome. So this is super interesting. What you're talking about there is novelty, and I think the word novelty, or at least in the English language, it has the connotation of like shallow and something that's just like cool for the. It's interesting for like 5 minutes, then it's done. I think when you in the context of that, where you create a storyboard, the novelty is actually the real power behind it, because it's something different. It's not a PowerPoint, it's not a Zoom meeting, or whatever they were doing back then. It has this intrigue where someone wants to learn more about it, and that's the start of a really good story. Again, just keeping it general, getting people involved first of all, having the general themes, then going more specific, I think is absolutely key. And again, that's something like that took a lot of courage to do that. So you said you're not experienced in drawing. It's something that was probably a bit daunting for you at the time. And I think that's a really great example of humility as well. How important do you think humility is when it comes to general data leadership?
It's definitely a key trait that you have to possess, because when you look at the field and all the different things that you can do there, to suggest that you can be an expert in the field in general would just be ridiculous. So you have to be willing to accept the fact that all your previous knowledge, all your opinions could be changed tomorrow by the emergence of something new. And that happens all the time. Maybe not on the bigger scale all the time, but in the smaller things, people come up with clever solutions that makes you go, "Oh, stuff I did yesterday, well, that's no longer the best way of doing it." So if you become too stuck with particular ideas, then I think you're going to get into trouble fairly quickly.
Absolutely, absolutely. So we mentioned a lot of good adjectives, I think, like courage, humility, and vulnerability. You mentioned as well. With your, let's talk about, let's separate the question into like your previous roles and now your current role. What kind of role do you see that you're playing as in this organization as a data leader? Are you a change agent? Are you an evangelist? Are you someone who helps get data over the line? What would you perceive your roles as, both currently and previously?
I think definitely change agent and evangelist both ring true with the work that I do currently, but also the previous roles. That's a part of it. But also, obviously, making sure that you build something tangible. So there has to be a certain focus on delivery as well. I have been fortunate in all my positions that I had the good people around me who could also help with the different aspects. Sometimes I've had to do the delivery myself, sometimes I've had to do the evangelism myself, but always I found myself maybe even seeking out teams, even if they weren't formal, to make sure that we had those capabilities at hand, because I don't think any one person could do all of this him or herself. So I definitely think it's a team sport, and probably that's also to me a personal thing. I grew up with a lot of team sports. I even coach handball, as it is. It's a European thing. So to me, putting together a team that can perform is something that I do both work-wise, but also in my personal life. And it's very rewarding, actually. That's probably the reason why I do it.
And you mentioned that this team analogy is very team-based. How do you approach the rest of the team, let's say in this case the organization, to help them become more data informed, not driven?
I think the guy with the black slides, there was one of the things that I learned from him, that was making sure that you zoom in on a few messages. You have to be very, very curious about your audience. You mentioned that yourself earlier. So if you do a piece of analysis for somebody else, you have to be interested in at least two things. So one is making sure you understand the field of work that they do, so you don't make any completely silly or obvious recommendations. You have to come up with something that makes them think, that's actually interesting. And then I think the other part is you have to be interested in the language that they use. So getting acquainted with the way they talk about things, the specifics of acronyms and other things that they use, so you don't come off as someone who's completely new to the field. If you pay enough attention to those two things, then I think you have a fighting chance of coming up with something from your data that they will find interesting.
And a lot of that is about mutual trust. So what do you think are some of the best ways to build and facilitate trust? You've kind of touched on a few things previously as well.
I think you shouldn't underestimate getting to know each other, and in my world, that also means getting to know people beyond their role. So for example, understand what people's hobbies are. So you can use that sometimes as sort of an odd entry into a conversation. It's also a way of sometimes parking discussions to say, okay, I get the sense that we're not really getting anywhere, so let's take a break and then we talk about something else. So knowing which could be the things that would be interesting to talk about is definitely not a stupid thing to pick up. But I think trust it's like love. It's not something you can ask for. It's something that you have to build, and it's something you have to earn. And that also suggests that trust is something that takes time. And obviously, you can do certain things to accelerate. You can honor your commitments. You can surprise people. You can be interesting. But at the end of the day, I think it is going to take a bit of time in a collaboration to get to the point where you have to trust.
And trust, just like love, takes years to build and moments to break, right? And that's the hard part.
Exactly.
What do you think then are some of the best questions to ask when build trust? When you look at new stakeholders and you approach them, and what's your kind of process for that?
I don't think I have a sort of a set process. I think basically just by intuition, I would be keen to understand people's backgrounds, but also understand what do they do sort of beyond the immediate work role that they fill. Where they live, if it's around the holidays, understand where they traveled. I happen to be a fairly big history and culture buff, so I always find it interesting to understand where people have gone and what they've seen, because they might have seen some of the stuff that I only read about, and then that in itself is interesting. I enjoy sports quite a bit, so that's also a natural icebreaker. But I find that if you're curious on the world in general, then anything flies. It could be cooking. I was fortunate enough to have an Italian lady teach me how to make pasta this summer. That in itself is a nice conversation starter. So there's a ton of ways you can do that. But I think you have to do what I think great salesmen or do. They don't jump to the conclusion. They take the time to sort of navigate the room and then slowly approach the topic that everybody knows we have to talk about at some point. But they are good at making sure that the mood is there before we start talking about the difficult stuff.
Yeah, and good salespeople, just like good data leaders, have this natural and genuine curiosity as opposed to asking questions for the sake of the relationship. I think it can be hard, but it also can be quite easy to see when it's sincere and when it is disingenuous as well.
True.
So, look, Morten, we've had a great chat. I've just got a few more questions for you. You come across as someone who, extensive background in BI and analytics. What do you like most about your or working in this space?
I like the fact that it's difficult. I like the fact that it's a mix of many disciplines. Back when I had to pick my education, I was going back and forth between studying Spanish, which I actually started doing, and then becoming an engineer. And I even considered working as an archaeologist at some point. So this breadth of disciplines that go into data leadership is what really that's what gets my juices flowing.
So, what advice would you give for aspiring data leaders?
I think that's if you're early on in your career, don't worry so much about where you'll be 5 or 10 years from now. Just really get nerdy with the stuff that you're doing right now. It'll take you great places. It'll give you great experiences, and more than anything, it'll allow you to deliver something that other people will recognize. Then later on, if you do this a couple of times, you'll be asked to pick up more responsibility. And if you, like me, feel you end up always sitting at the end of the table, being the one who gets to make the decisions, then I think you should also ask for the formal responsibility and not just accept that you're a specialist who's then been asked to do a leadership role as well. I don't think that's fair.
Well, Morten, thanks for coming on the show. It's been really fun talking about the fundamentals of storytelling in a data context and talking more about your role, your career, your experiences. And we hope to have you on again on the show soon.
I would love that. Thanks for